First of all, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, students, thank you for your gracious hospitality here and during my time in Paris the last couple of days, to IPSI, to the École de Guerre, École Militaire, to the French government as well, and more importantly to the American University of Paris. I have to say I've been a big admirer of the American University of Paris. I wish I came to school here. But it's with its reputation of academic excellence, and I also extend this to the École de Guerre, that these are wonderful institutions, and along with IPSI and others, that you're located in this great city of Paris, and what I see here are efforts, multilateral efforts, think tanks, military, the government, academia, looking to develop what I would consider truly global citizens, who understand the challenges of our culturally diverse planet and are empowered, I hope, to find solutions to the pressing problems of our times. All of you, I look at these faces, all of you can make a real impact in the world. And I am truly thankful to engage in a dialogue with all of you today. And I'm going to be sure, can you all hear me back there? I'm going to talk a little bit about AFRICOM and our military outlook. And I'm going to start from the strategic, work a bit down lower to the bread and butter, to the structure of AFRICOM. But the best place to start is to quote somebody I think you're familiar with. President Barack Obama's Sub-Saharan Africa strategy stated, and I quote, "It is clear that Africa is more important than ever to the security and prosperity of the international community and to the United States in particular. Africa's economies are among the fastest growing in the world, with technological change sweeping across the continent and offering tremendous opportunities in banking, medicine, politics, and business," end quote. Now, the four pillars within this national strategy towards Africa are to 1, strengthen democratic institutions, 2, spur economic growth, trade, and investment, 3, advance peace and security, and 4, promote opportunity and development. Now, against this very broad policy backdrop, the U.S. Africa Command is responsible to the Secretary of Defense for military relations with African nations, the African Union, and African regional security organizations. So it sounds pretty straightforward, but I would say that implementing these goals and objectives is the real challenge. And U.S. Africa Command's mission statement is that the command, with national and international partners, disrupts transnational threats, protects United States personnel and facilities, prevent and mitigates conflict, and builds defense capabilities in order to promote regional stability and, more importantly, prosperity. Now, in my current capacity as the Deputy to the Commander for Civil Military Engagement, or in the military you have acronyms, so it's DCME, I wear 2 hats at U.S. Africa Command, which is also known as AFRICOM. Wearing both my State Department and my Department of Defense hats, my primary function there is to help blend, fuse, interpret, deconflict, perhaps, foreign policy goals with our national security objectives as they apply to Africa, and to be more specific, to the actions, operations, planning, and programs of AFRICOM. I work in tandem with another deputy, the Deputy to the Commander for Military Operations, or the DCMO. So there's a DCME and a DCMO. And currently the DCMO is a 3-star admiral, a vice admiral of the United States Navy. And together, with our collective experiences from different professional orbits, me from the world of diplomacy and his from extensive military background, we try to offer AFRICOM's commander, General David Rodriguez, our best advice on how we can best deal with the security challenges and opportunities in Africa. And both the DCMO and I ensure proper coordination occurs, or we try to ensure that proper coordination occurs, between the command's engagement activities and its military operations. Now, to the incoming staff coming to AFRICOM, I describe us, because they don't get this two-deputy thing, it's very weird for them, for the military. And I describe it that we are kind of like 2 halves of the same brain that support the commander. And in this regard, AFRICOM is unique amongst all of the 6 geographic commands of the United States government. having 2 deputies, 1 civilian and 1 military. And the distinction, and this distinction I have to say is by design, when AFRICOM was established in 2008. And I think it reflects the interdisciplinary and international character of security assistance in Africa. And in addition to the dual deputies that we have, other aspects of AFRICOM's structure highlights this character. As a senior civilian and senior foreign service officer at AFRICOM, I also ensure that the U.S. interagency, the interministerial aspect of the U.S. government, is well represented, that the views of the U.S. interagency from over 30 non-Department of Defense representatives representing more than 10 U.S. federal agencies are that their presence helps inform all the engagement plans and activities of the command. In fact, over half of AFRICOM, our headquarters, are civilians. And in terms of diplomats, we have the largest collection of foreign service officers at a non-diplomatic mission. It's about 16 folks from the State Department and USAID. And so I think this interagency character of AFRICOM mirrors the diversity and complexity that we find on the African continent. Now, when we look at Africa and we look at the challenges that are there, many of you know the challenges that are there, you look at it, and I would have to say that from our perspective, Africa's security environment it remains dynamic and it's uncertain. The sheer size of Africa is daunting. And when we look at the Mercator maps, it doesn't really represent the actual geographic space that makes up the continent. It's 3 times the size of the United States. I mean, you can put China, the United States, I think Australia, Great Britain, Western Europe, and still have room to move around. The 53 countries in Africa's area of responsibility, which is all of Africa except Egypt, which belongs to the U.S. Central Command, account for 1/4 of the world's nations. And its 1.2 billion citizens speak over 1,000 languages and represent at least 800 ethnic groups. They're all unique, these countries. 41% of Africans are under the age of 15, 41%. And by 2050, roughly 1 in 4 people on the planet will live in Africa. All of these folks are connecting to each other and to the world through the rapid spread of social media and information technologies on the continent. And with some of the highest economic growth rates in the world, about 8 of the 15 fastest growing economies in the world are in Africa, and as well as rapid rates of urbanization, in fact, the fastest rates of urbanization, as well as possessing tremendous natural resources, Africa's role in the global economy is growing and will continue to grow. And all of these factors, demographic, economic, natural resources, present tremendous opportunities for increasing prosperity for the continent, for uplifting Africans. However, these same positive factors can also be viewed as drivers of instability. Africa is rising, and so are the expectations of Africans. While greater popular demands can accelerate needed political and economic reforms, they can also be destabilizing, particularly in fragile states. Governments are struggling to broadly provide basic goods and reliable services to their increasingly urban populations, let alone harness the demographic dividends, the dynamic aspect that this brings. Across much of the continent, crime and corruption impede the development of democratic institutions. They reduce security and stability and constrain economic development. Corrupt leadership, combined with the other drivers I've mentioned earlier, the burgeoning youth populations, expanding urbanization, and rapid access to technology, can make something of a potent brew for popular discontent. Corruption is also corrosive, undermining the standing of government and its security forces among the polity that they are meant to serve. Now, to me, my personal view on this is that the key to countering these drivers of instability, to keep the positive factors moving forward, is governance. In my opinion, improving governance, making it more effective, transparent, and inclusive, is the principal economic and security challenge facing Africa. In many regards, I think governance is kind of the social vaccine that can address the problems of crime and corruption. Now, while much of this challenge is outside of AFRICOM's purview, we can make a contribution to this effort by building partner capacity. And our strategy reflects that the most sustainable way to protect the United States and its interests from transnational threats is by enhancing cooperation between our country and regional, international, and bilateral partners on security issues of mutual concern. Our underlying priority in AFRICOM for military-to-military engagement focuses on strengthening the relationships with African countries and our international partners through an array of operations and exercises and engagements to support the development of professional African militaries that respect human rights, adhere to the rule of law, function transparently, and more effectively contribute to the stability of Africa. This is the kind of the bread and butter work of AFRICOM's activities on the continent. This is what we do day to day. This is the long-term grist of what we do. From seminars on the development and application of military justice, to workshops addressing women, peace, and security, to field training on small unit tactics, to workshops to enhance regional and continental logistics capabilities, to help develop capacities for disaster preparedness, humanitarian anti-mining, and specialized peacekeeping training. Our goal is to have a long-term kind of advisory relationship that help build and sustain local capacities as our partners make progress towards stability. We are increasingly leveraging the knowledge and posture and presence of strong partners and allies, both traditional and emerging. Our strategic partners in Africa are growing, reflecting strong mutual interest between ourselves and our African friends, growing regional capacities, and increased interoperability between the militaries as we work across the seams to ensure that they can work together in things like peacekeeping, for example. At the same time, our support to the activities of our European allies, in this particular instance here, particularly France, in Africa in areas like peacekeeping, counterterrorism, and maritime security, have helped reinforce traditional relationships and strengthen new ones. Now, like I said, I just described the routine, day-to-day, longer-term work of AFRICOM, the stuff that our folks are constantly trying to figure out how to do through our programming, through the resources that are brought to bear. And I have to stress that when we look at those resources, it's a blend. About half of the money that we utilize to effect security sector assistance in Africa comes from the State Department. It's focusing on peacekeeping, it's focusing on a lot of things like that. Building partner capacity is drawn from that. The other half comes from the Department of Defense, and it looks at issues such as how to enhance capabilities against terrorism and maritime security. Now, as I mentioned, we work with partners on and off the continent. We do everything on the continent under the direction and the full concurrence of our ambassadors and our embassies in Africa. We do not work unilaterally. AFRICOM does not engage unilaterally on the continent. We do everything through our embassies, through the direct concurrence and direction of our ambassadors, and, more importantly, our African partners and where we work. Let me stress that. We do not do things on Africa alone by ourselves. We have the concurrence of our ambassadors, it's plugged into our overall programming, and we work with the concurrence of the governments in which we effect these operations, these activities, these engagements, these exercises. Now, against this ongoing long-term effort, I would like to shift a bit to speak about the 5 priorities at the command that seize our attention right now. If you want to talk about it, I could say these are the kind of the short-term and the medium-term challenges that AFRICOM faces that we've been given the task to kind of address. And the first priority is neutralizing al-Shabaab in East Africa and transitioning the African Union mission in Somalia, called AMISOM, these AMISOM-led efforts to a Somali National Army-led efforts. In other words, we're looking at this inflection where we have AMISOM leading the fight, and eventually we want to transition to see the Somali federal government and the Somali National Army take on the security challenge. We are assisting our East African partners in neutralizing al-Shabaab in Somalia and developing the Somali National Army. We hope that this will increase the opportunities for the Somali government and the people to make progress in state formation, developing a sense of national identity, and building national institutions, including the security forces that are representative of the population, not of specific elites. Now, several years of modest U.S. security assistance in East Africa, including the advice and assistance of our military forces, have helped our partners gradually strengthen their capacity to conduct peacekeeping operations and counter violent extremist organizations, terrorist groups. We always have to have an acronym. VEO means terrorist. In Somalia. Our second priority is degrading these violent extremist organizations in North and West Africa and containing instability in Libya. Our allies and partners are increasing their capacity and collaboration in addressing the security threats across the Maghreb, the Sahel, and the Lake Chad Basin regions. Conditions in Libya have declined significantly as competition between rival governments and militias have fueled conflict. And in this uncertain space, terrorist groups seek to take advantage. And while security has declined in Libya as well as in Mali, for example, the international community's coordination in addressing these regional security challenges has increased and improved dramatically. But more needs to be done. Algeria, Tunisia, Niger, Chad, Morocco, and France have strengthened counterterrorism and border security efforts, often in collaboration with each other and with other partners. NATO countries are beginning to work together more closely to address threats to Europe's southern flank, including the foreign fighter flows emanating from North Africa. And over the past year, the U.S. has provided more than $3 million on a monthly basis in airlift, air refueling, and reconnaissance support to the French military's efforts in the Trans-Sahel. And with this support, the French have been able to continue their multiple missions throughout Africa, specifically counterterrorism efforts focusing on defeating VEOs, terrorist groups, in the Trans-Sahel. U.S. engagement and assistance have facilitated increased regional dialogue, partnerships, and capacity. We have helped partners prepare for deployment in multilateral peacekeeping operation in Mali, where 11 African countries are contributing military forces to that UN mission. And in addition, Africa Command is working with the U.S. European Command and the U.S. Central Command to monitor trans-regional threats. And although the security situation in Libya has limited the international community's ability to support the development of institutions there, we continue to look for opportunities to constructively influence the situation in Libya and support the international peace process and the region. And as conditions improve, we will be prepared to support the development of Libyan defense capacities. We look forward to having a Libyan partner to deal with. Our third priority is containing Boko Haram in the Lake Chad Basin region. In Nigeria, Boko Haram is conducting increasingly complex and lethal attacks aimed at terrorizing civilians and destabilizing a government that is also facing serious economic and governance challenges, and particularly the economic challenge heightened by the falling price of oil. In addition to its campaign of violence in Nigeria, Boko Haram is expanding its activities in Cameroon, Chad, Niger, and Benin. We are working with these countries and allies to support regional efforts against Boko Haram and the facilities for the development of this multinational task force in the Lake Chad Basin. Our goal is to provide capacity to improve interoperability, communication, and information sharing amongst these African partners so they can address their security challenge. But in the end, it's Nigeria's lead. We look to support that, and we look for opportunities following the election of President Buhari to enhance that cooperation with Nigeria. Our fourth priority is interdicting illicit activity in the Gulf of Guinea and Central Africa. Regional partners are gradually strengthening their capacity and cooperation in addressing the maritime security challenges. And for this, I have to say that AFRICOM, I'm very proud of what we've done. We actually started before AFRICOM started, working with the African countries in the Gulf of Guinea region, slowly, assuredly, through workshops and discussions, bringing in other partners like the French, like the European Union and others, Brazil, through exercises and such, to enhance the dialogue amongst Africans to look at the problem of maritime security in West Africa as a collective challenge. As a result, we now have a code of conduct that was developed in Yaoundé for 22 countries in Africa. They're all developing their maritime operations centers. They're looking at developing regional centers. And for the first time, we have coordination between ECOWAS and the Central African Economic Organization to deal with this question. And it's not just ministries of defense that we're dealing with here, that we engage. Ministries of fisheries, ministries of justice, the customs folks, finance, the presidencies. Because the challenge of maritime security is multidisciplinary, it's international, and no one African country has the resources to address this problem. They're working together, and it's been modest gains, but I'm proud of those efforts. I was there at the beginning. I'm happy to see where it is now. In Central Africa, vast undergoverned spaces, limited infrastructure, poverty, and complex ethnic and religious demographics create a challenging security environment. Working with Uganda, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, the Central African Republic, and South Sudan, we've worked with the African Union's Regional Task Force against the Lord's Resistance Army, the Joseph Kony crew that has terrorized Africans and African children for decades. This regional task force, with the advice and assistance of U.S. forces, have made significant progress in weakening the LRA and reducing its ability to threaten civilian populations. And as a result of the combined efforts of military forces, civilian agencies, and non-governmental agencies, all working together, we have seriously degraded the capabilities of the LRA. It no longer threatens regional stability, and its capacity to harm civilian populations has been greatly diminished. Today, there's about less than 200 LRA fighters remaining, and the communities in the LRA-affected areas are better prepared to respond to attacks from the LRA and other armed groups. It is unclear whether the LRA is likely to rebuild, but any potential growth would be gradual. But today we can say that local populations are more resistant and resilient to attacks, largely to the result of the improved communication that has allowed villages to report their LRA's activities and warn neighboring communities. And this has seriously reduced the LRA's freedom of movement and has empowered villages to better prepare to defend themselves against attack. Our fifth priority is building the peacekeeping and humanitarian assistance and disaster relief capacities of African nations. Africa Command conducts security force assistance and exercises to assess and build the capacity of African institutions and forces to execute peacekeeping. We work with the AU. We work with troop contributing countries. We work with ECOWAS. We work with ECAS. We utilize State Department resources and our own to develop peacekeepers. Africans are actively engaged in peacekeeping in Africa. There's about 80,000 African peacekeepers operating on the continent today. And I'm proud to say the United States has trained just about all of them through our CODA program. And now we're looking to see what we can do to take that to the next level, to enhance the logistics capabilities, the engineering capabilities, the communication capabilities, to make them indigenous to African nations so that they have this capability themselves and they can manage to train their own peacekeepers for the future. Now, we also get involved in humanitarian response. I would say that our support to France in the Central African Republic is a good example of that. But perhaps no better example, of which we are extremely proud of at AFRICOM. And I think you may have heard about this. There was this Ebola thing that happened in West Africa, where AFRICOM was there to support USAID. We were not in the lead. The United States military was not in the lead. USAID was there. And our work, we were able to create that space, that time, so that the international community could react and respond effectively to essentially stop the spread and turn back the spread of Ebola in West Africa. There you have it. Our 5 priorities, our bread and butter work, our long-term work, and this is what AFRICOM's all about. The up, the down, the in and out, the yin and the yang. And to bring this all together, I think I can say that as we look at the security challenges and opportunities in Africa, AFRICOM's core tenet, what I want you to take away from all of this, they do blah, 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 but the one word I want you to remember is partnership. We really do believe in this. This is a central theme throughout all of our activities, is the importance we place on increasing collaboration and interoperability with our bilateral partners on the continent, with multinational and interagency partners in our own government, with our international partners, working with our allies and others, to expand our sharing with multinational entities, enhancing that trust and confidence and interoperability of our partners, refining our posture and presence in Africa to reduce the risk for the protection of U.S. personnel and their facilities. We try to do what we can to work with everyone in countering the spread of violent extremist ideology, to leverage combined training and exercises to strengthen the capacities of these militaries, and to increase flexibility through agreements with host governments to improve access, overflight, and engagement. The increasing convergence of U.S. security interests in Africa and with those of robust European partners such as France, as well as international partners, provides opportunities to significantly enhance our cooperation as we work together toward long-term stability and security. Improving trust and collaboration will improve the likelihood of our collective success, and in my view, this is what we call partnership. Security matters in Africa are complex and they're challenging, and they will remain so for the foreseeable future. These challenges require an international collaborative approach. I keep saying that over and over again, and I want you to remember that. That must blend both diplomatic engagement, international economic aid, and broad security sector assistance and cooperation. And forums such as this, at this wonderful institution in this beautiful city on a perfect day, why we're inside I don't know, is what I hope can spark the dialogue between AFRICOM and you to help maybe you in the future look for innovative solutions to the challenge that we face. There's not one country, not one development partner, not one NGO, nor one military can resolve this problem and these challenges. It must be a collective effort. Thank you all, and I look forward to your questions.